Hello, this is Samuel Reynolds, and you're listening and watching Unlock Astrology from unlockastrology.com. So, I promised that I would start doing some videos, but I'm starting with audio and may do some more video itself, broadcasting even live. And I thought I would start with one of my more controversial topics that I've tweeted about from my Twitter account, which is SF as in Fred Reynolds, SF Reynolds on Twitter. And I've talked about reincarnation. And my most recent conversation about reincarnation comes from something that the Astrology News Service, which you can find at astrologynewsservice.com, be sure to include news, the S in news, and there's an additional S in service, all one word. At that particular site, they've published the results of a survey of some 500 astrologers, where about 68% of them believed in reincarnation. So, 7 out of 10 is what they cite. Only 12% disagreed or strongly disagreed with a reincarnation premise. I'm part of that 12%. So, in a series of videos, starting with this one, I want to explain a little bit why. But I want to start first with what is this about and why is this important to astrology, or more particularly, an astrologer? I also want to clarify that it is not my goal to convert anyone. We don't know what happens when we die. That's the point blank truth as far as we know, in terms of any quote unquote intersubjective or subjective sense. We die, we have lots of theories and ideas, and we've had for millennia on what happens when we die, but do we know authentically, authoritatively? No. So, when I talk about not believing or having the absence of belief in reincarnation, it is not my goal to say to anyone, yours is wrong, or what you believe is wrong. It's more so, I don't know, and I have no reason to think that particular thing is true. So, and notice the I, the subjective sense there. So that's very important. What's also important in relation to astrology is that when I started learning astrology nearly 30 years ago, I came to it in learning about it, basically reading particular sources that made it sound that astrology and reincarnation go hand in hand. I didn't learn until maybe 15 years into my study that that's not true. Actually, reincarnation is something that came later, more like the 20th century, in Western astrology. That's also very important for me to say. This is not commentary on Vedic astrology. I will get to that in a little bit. But when I say I'll get to that, I'll address that particular issue of Vedic in astrology and in relation to the idea of reincarnation. But what's interesting is that the concept of reincarnation, and I would recommend a book to you. One of the things I said that I would do and I will do is talk about book reviews. And one particular book that I really like is a book by Kathy Allen, and it's called When Worlds Collide, Another Look at the Lunar Nodes. I highly recommend it, and she has a great introduction into understanding the nodes, and particularly, she documents in very clear form the idea of how reincarnation became introduced in Western astrology, specifically with the nodes. Now, there are other markers, just to be clear, that people now have as a common association with reincarnation. People will talk about the 12th house, we'll talk about the 8th house, we'll also focus on Pluto as a testament to reincarnation, and there's also even the 4th house. But commonly, people will talk about the nodes, and particularly the South Node, as your past lives. What's important to know is that it's pretty much starting with one particular book that she was able to identify by Dane Rudger, particularly the Astrology of Personality from 1936, where an axis of destiny is introduced between the nodes, where the north node symbolizes more how you're progressing in this life, and the south node is more so from your previous lives. And what's fascinating is to see that the popularity of this comes more into relief even into the 60s and 70s with other books, like one particular book written by Ronald C. Davison of the Davison Charts fame, where in 1964 his astrology book also talks about the North Node and the South Node being about developments in this life and spiritual development. And then, of course, one of the more famous books from the 70s is Karmic Astrology, The Moons, Nodes, and Reincarnation by Martin Schulman. That's a book I actually have come across, and that's where I also read about the connotation with the nodes. So what's interesting to me is that there are many astrologers who can't even conceptualize the nodes without talking about reincarnation or using those as particular markers for reincarnation. And one thing to know is that this is something relatively new. If you talk to a 16th, 17th century astrologer, one, the concept of past lives, and I'm talking mainly about a Western astrologer, whether he's in the Islamic world or in the Christian world, that wouldn't make any particular sense to him. I want to say her, but there probably weren't as many she astrologers, unfortunately. So, with that said, not only do we not have the concept of past lives, but the association in astrology itself is something that's new. So when I came to my own, which I will talk about in another video, when I came to my own realization that I didn't have the presence of a belief in reincarnation, I began to look at, like, well, where did that come from for me with astrology? And then that's also when I found that, to be clear, it's not something that is endemic necessary to astrology itself. So I think that's very important, because whenever I say to an astrologer, or even it comes up in terms of reincarnation, it seems almost as if it's an obvious fact that as an astrologer, I believe in past lives and past lives are real. So I just wanted to, with this initial video, make it clear, or audio, make it clear that you can have an astrology without reincarnation and with particular points associated with it. So it is interesting and worth mining and exploring to note that 7 out of 10 astrologers believe that reincarnation is real and that somehow it has a tie to astrology. So tune in for more, and thank you for listening thus far.